It can be
deal with it. So we're making artifacts. So that's the process for the innovation thing, right?
Yeah, it has several different steps. It has several different moments. It has, voila, so that's it. I mean, Sylvia, did you have a chance to read it or not?
Yeah. I was also replying to you, but on Telegram, not by email. So I'm familiar with I do have the books of Clayton, and I'm also familiar with business model canvas, jobs to be done, like business value proposition, also, well, minimal valuable products. And what was not very clear for me, so the course is not about the process itself, it's about how to manage innovation from the financial perspective. Is it that?
No, the course was about, first of all, the course was about a guy, a company, an organization coming in at the very beginning and asking questions, innovation questions or topics that they encountered in their own business or activity and didn't have an answer for.
Okay.
And then the teams, then teams were made and people were trying to address these issues. Now, the idea would be to let the people innovate themselves. In other words, they have to come up. That's why the problem space is so important, because they have to find something that is worth innovating, and then come up with some kind of a prototype. Not so, even if it's just a, how do you say, a prototype, a conceptual prototype, it has to be a prototype.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you make hypothesis, it has to be coherent. Coherence is the name of the game. And it can be on anything. This is why researching, it used to be easy for them to how do you say, to start, because the problem was already given. And it turns out that the problem is one of the most interesting and difficult parts of the process itself.
Yeah, to define the right problem and identify the real needs. And so your students are master or PhD students?
Master students, they're all engineers.
Engineers on which field?
Electricity, what is called civil engineers. Is that what it is called also in English? They build bridges and things like that. And so electricity, civil engineers, and the last one is, I forgot for the moment, but it has to do with sustainability, I think.
So actual engineers, like we
they build
deal with stuff.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, what a stupid math. And of course, the last one is computer science. So they all know everything about machine learning and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. But do they have a shared context to define a problem together, or how were you thinking to address that part?
No, I say put yourself in a team and find me a problem. Let's go.
Yes, the classic. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. So the idea was that we did a long thing in the past because of this, and they found it very confusing. So what I was thinking of doing is rapidly giving, instead of letting them go through the process as it is thought about, which is basically, you find a problem, you define a problem space, then you define a solution space, then you ideate, and then with the business model.
I didn't understand that.
Sorry.
And then with the business model canvas and the value proposition canvas, then you test your hypothesis, right? And then you do your form of prototyping. I was thinking of just giving them all the tools immediately up front. And so you go for the problem. And once you have the problem, this is what we use. We use job to be done, which is very, very interesting. We use business model canvas and so forth. So put it aside. And then now we're going to continue. And then you can do that. You can look at these tools on your own, and we can discuss them. But basically now they're there. So you know that there is a logic. You know that there is a coherence somewhere. And then you start. Because before, they were very, very unsettled about the process, right? Because they usually had a questions that they had absolutely no control over, which was something like, funnily enough, oftentimes dealing with human relationships, oftentimes dealing with organizations. Um, rarely up their alley, if you see what I mean. Rarely a product. And then they were sort of lost, you know. So the idea is, I don't want them to be too lost, at least in their mind, but as the process itself is very mysterious for them, very, very mysterious. How can you come with an answer for something that is completely unknown? Is one of the most mysterious things that they've encountered in their school life.
Yeah, of course, because we're outside of learning, propositional learning. We're in a procedure first and foremost, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. But I mean, from that perspective, like, these nerds are familiar with procedures in the engineering context, right? So it's not like there's not an order of operations that, you know. So I wonder what, like, what might be a universal metaphor to sort of dress the procedure of innovation in, like, so what's, you know, what is something that is so accessible and so obvious that you know, nerds can grok it in that way, and then make the pivot into, all right, now take away the bridge, you know, take away the cleanly defined problem, and we're in a similar sort of procedure. So that's one thing that sort of jumps up. And so, coming back to this thing about, so basically we've got a collection of students in different disciplines, and the difference is where previously they were sort of given a problem space. Now the problem space is open.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the current hypothesis is, since they have trouble, and I can definitely grok this, like, the way that some people like really need to see the overall process. Otherwise, like, they'll get in it, and they'll be like, but what about all this other shit? Like, that often needs to be settled and tamped down with, hey, we are in a process. It's going to go from here to there. Here's a very low resolution, the whole thing. And, like, trust me, when we're here, we're going to get there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea.
Okay. All right.
And it's interesting that you should say you should start with a metaphor, because of course their metaphor is their own job. I mean, it's complicated. Therefore, you have a beginning, you have an end. You can imagine the solution. The solution exists. You know it exists. It's somewhere within a knowledge frame that they master or can master. Again, that's the whole thing with the problem space. You know, there's very interesting discussion around it. But basically, for these people, for like most people, the problem space exists because there's a solution somewhere. And now, of course, the same thing goes in innovation, but it's not as obvious.
Yeah,
because the
it's
process
not.
is emergent, you know, the process. And then you have, like, in the process, for example, you have these notions like divergence, convergence, which are important. You have the idea of not converging too fast, because basically, when you're talking about innovation, people are going to glance at what they think the problem is, and then they're going to go for the solution immediately. Especially those people. They're problem solvers, so they consider it as a problem to solve rather than as something to create.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. So another thing that is particular in this course is that what I gave you just now was the process of actually dealing with an innovation idea. Okay, all the way down to what seems to be a test of coherence. Along the lines of the business model canvas, which are basically the desirability, feasibility, and viability. So these are these are the critical indicators of any innovation. And then there are things that are theoretical and that are context, that are context, more context oriented, like I don't know if you've heard of effectuation, but effectuation are a bunch of principles that were devised by a woman called Sarasvati. She's an Indian, originally from India. She worked with Herbert Simon. I don't know if it rings a bell, but he was a Nobel Prize in economics. And she did a long study of entrepreneurs that have actually of successful entrepreneurs, right? So for her, successful does not mean I'm just barely surviving. It means I'm actually quoted in on the stock market, and I have a certain amount of how do you say, volume? Okay, say $200 million. So you're talking to guys who actually went from zero to something rather sustained, if not sustainable. And she asked them all kinds of little questions about how they went about doing what they did. Not necessarily technical questions, but there's I think 2 or 3 pages of questions. And then she came up with like, oh, they all sort of seem to be acting the same way, right? First of all, they don't give themselves an objective necessarily, but they think about the cost of doing what they're going to do. What is their, again, if they include people, most of the time they're not completely, how do you say, stuck on their original ideas. So they invite change, as opportunities. Anyway, there are 5 different principles of effectuation, which are behaviors of that innovators seem to share. So these are, for example, this is a content you don't necessarily. It used to be, you see, another thing about this course was that not only did you have to find an innovation, but you had to respond to innovative questions, but you had to manage your own team, because we went wholly self-organized on this. And of course that they have no idea of how to do that either. So it's a lot of things. I realized why they had problems. A lot of them.
It's deep water.
Yeah.
It's deep water. Yeah, but cool. Okay, cool. All right. So
So
let me try and maybe try and recap just to make sure I'm keeping up, right? So one of the sort of subject matter areas is also around this conceptual space of effectuation. I'll try and park my grievances with studies of that have a high tendency of survivorship bias, but okay. So that seems like a good piece of information. And previously, students have had the 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 burden of self-organization or self-management to also wrestle with.
in fact, they still have it.
Okay.
I think that liberating structure is going to make that even worse for them, because I'm going to disappear little by little.
Okay.
So I have a question. What is the how would you evaluate these people from the course?
Alors, they have a presentation. They in fact in the old days they had what we wrongly called a midterm, because it was not. It was just a space where for a conversation with the person that came with the questions and the teams as to where they were at that moment. So halfway through the program, you had this moment of conversation, right, to see if everybody was sort of, understanding what they were doing. And I mean, of course, they still retained the ultimate decision, okay, but they had a conversation with the person that came and asked the question. And the evaluation was a presentation to that person at the end of 14 weeks. They presented it. They had 10 minutes presentation to do and a report. In other words, a trace of how they've done it. I know that exists in drawing. It's like, your drawing thing, a little booklet where you noted everything that you've done and the various stages where you were and the various topics that you addressed that I help organize, right?
Mhm.
That is given at the beginning. Because and then to finish this question of evaluation, and then they had an exam, which was a whatever it is, questions, exams on all the theory and all the tools and all the process that they went through. And it was 50-50.
Yeah, okay. I was going to ask that part.
And yeah.
So
We had tried many other things, but the idea is to be the least, the idea was to be the least, how do you say, result or the like marks and things like that. The idea was to really enjoy the process and make sure that you, at the end, you knew enough so that you know, it's university after all, So you have this hands-on thing, right? Which takes most of their time. But they self-organize, so they can discuss concepts if they want. You have classes of every Wednesday, 14 times. You have 2 hours. The idea was to give a 40-minute max sort of something. It could be theory, it could be tools, it could be anything, and then to let them work.
Mm-hmm.
okay, so in terms of the 14 weeks, there's a container every week, that is the class setting, 40 minutes of like of information, and how long is the total container of each class?
2 hours.
2?
Yeah, 2 hours.
Okay.
So
And what's the expectation in terms of like work outside of the class setting?
they self-organize.
Okay.
I don't want to, we didn't want to know
Okay.
anything about it.
Yeah, for sure. But like all right, so let's pause the recording and like, yeah, self-organized. But like what's like the actual expectation? Like what would you say if you're gonna crush this thing? Do you think is it plausible that only in the container of those 2 hours that they could do anything that's gonna
Yeah.
like pass muster?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have, then it's the wild world, the way the world, for example, project they can look at, first of all, they have material, huh? They have we have a sort of a library of documents with movies, with things like that. I also forgot to tell you that part of this program is, so let's say that we're going to say 12 weeks are devoted to innovation, presentation, and that kind of thing. And the midterm, which is the discussion, which now is going to be interesting because it can be a discussion between themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be this, so there's not going to be or something else, or more time to do their thing. But at the end, they have to present, and they'll present around, in front of everyone. And I have no idea of how to mark that, but I would like to have myself mark it on the one hand, but maybe them too. Maybe they can also, other teams can judge their own peers. I don't know if that's such a great idea, but I quite like the idea that, also to emphasize the fact that, I'm not interested in grades. I'm happy that if they have their, they get points when you're at university, when you go through a course. The most important thing is not necessarily the grade, but it is the points that you do when you pass. So you have a certain amount of points that you get that go towards your master's. And when you have that sum of points, you get your master's, no matter what.
Okay.
So
Sure.
that's it.
But you
And
get
then
the points regardless of your grade. So if you
Yeah.
get the average grade or a top grade, you get the same points.
Yeah.
It's
So
like
when you get
credits.
the top points, it's because you're happy because you did a good job. the job itself, the minimum viable product is basically to pass the course.
Everybody gets a diploma, basically. Right?
Everybody
gets
in my class, there was no tricks, there was no hidden, there's nothing. And the other part, it's a quick part, but it's an interesting one in terms of concept and things like that. It is change, like, you know, innovations change things. How do you deal with that? What that was one, and what kind, and how would you measure risk? Okay, because there's this idea that entrepreneurs are fools and they love risk, which is not the case at all. And so you have these two last topics. The last it's at the end of the process. It's parallel to the process, and we address change and how to manage change, especially if it's within organizations.
What's the title of the course itself?
Innovation and Change.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I do have like a couple of maybe just logistic questions, because I'm guessing that we're not gonna cover everything today. And maybe it's something that we can also start to set expectations about how much time do you want to spend on this? How frequently? And
Well, so if it's okay with you, because again, this has to be vetted. You know, this is like really on the edge of the world for imagine for a university. So depending on the depth of what we can come up with, it'll have to be vetted. So but on the other hand, I think that what is interesting for us, or maybe even for you, is that we have, you know how to organize something that is more of a course than just you know, an intervention. So it depends on your for me, I have everything to gain from this, so it's not fair if you don't find something for you in it. So for me, I'm happy to go as much, you know. In fact, Jeremy knows, because when we had the crew, our crew that was the most, how do you say, uh, distracted crew you could ever imagine. We started with the idea of working on things like the canvas, on models and frameworks, and see how we could turn them, or we could address them through liberating structures. And so we started like that. So this one is a little bit, you know, how do you go about foraging into the problem space? How do you go? What do? You might use some liberating structures to self-organize. It might help as well. So you have. So it's really, to cut it short, it's really up to you guys to how much time you want to devote to that if you're interested.
So when's how frequent does this happen? When's the next course start?
Well, if we're going to do something deep and new, I would have to propose it by the end of June at the latest, because then everybody goes on vacation and it starts in September.
on which format will you have to present it? What level of detail do you have to give?
Well, what can I say? Yeah, it has to be, it has to be, I know, I would say five pages or something like that. I would say, because basically what I did before was a program. Okay, so you had a sort of an Excel file with like the various weeks and the various topics addressed and the various contents addressed and the expectations. But depending on how we're going to do this, and if it changes, then I will have to, first of all, explain the liberating structures, which doesn't take very long, or not even, because I mean, most people, when you start to talk about them, they say, what is it? And but if you just say, well, this is how we're going to organize every single, but roughly, yeah, how we organize every moment of the innovation project, how we deal with the phases of the project. Yeah, five, I'd say 5 pages, something like that.
Yeah, so basically, like what you, if I understand right now, like what you've got is effectively like a design storyboard for the whole course, and we would need at least that, plus probably some explanation, like sort of either justifying or explaining those moves,
Yeah,
and why those design choices are made.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Given that the problem space it's now open, it seems like the course is now going to take longer because you need to find some time to define the problem. How much time do you want to add for that, like on top of what you had before?
No, I want to stay within the same time frame. The
Okay.
problem, the idea of the problem um, was given, but then we spent some time understanding what the problem was.
Okay.
In other words, they didn't have to choose, but they still had to inquire about what it is that the person wanted to do, what it meant, and how other had treated it, and various aspects of the problem. And then there's also so there is this time, and this time you can take. I would like to expand basically the time of the problem reflection, finding something. This is why I'm quite happy to have them sort of come up with it. And then when you're in the solution space, then you have ideation, and before that you have the job to be done. And the job to be done is an interesting concept because it says, well, you never buy things. You hire them, and you hire them to do something that is important, that makes sense to you. So you want to go to your job and not to take your car, you take a bike. So voilà, here, suddenly there's the bike, and the job to be done can be taking my bike every morning to work. Okay. And that will influence the design of the bike, and and you see and then when you have a job to be done, right? In other words, progressing in improving what you want to do, which I quite like the way of thinking that way. And then you have really interesting discoveries about who your competition is, really. So it might not be other bikes. It could be one of those things with, we call it in French, trottinette. There's the little things with 2 little wheels, and people and you kick it with your leg. There's a word for
Scooter.
that. A scooter. So a scooter is your it could be your car, it could be walking, it can be the train. So people think usually when they have to deal with products that the competition is those who make the same products. And so that is a very, very interesting moment to really think of the job to be done. The job to be done itself is a process. In other words, for any actions you're going to take, there is something that precedes it and something that follows it. So you can also innovate in any of those on this time scale. It's an interesting concept. So this is an interesting concept that is extremely, how do you say, helpful in finding something that is desirable. It doesn't tell you much about how to go about doing it, or whether in the end it is viable, but it certainly gives you the idea of the desirability of the product or the service or whatever it is that you want to do. If you want to build an organization, for example, same thing.
Yeah. So you mentioned also you have this sort of Excel with the topics for each of the sessions. Do you think that you will change those or
I mean, as you can see, the process is pretty much is not unless we come up with some real innovation within the process, which would be fun, but the process is pretty much set. So it's going to be like this, basically you have a sort of an order, right? You define the problem, you find a solution, you test your solution. and you see what impact it has on whatever environment it has. So it's pretty much that.
I thought that you were not gonna test it.
Well, you tested with the business you tested with, in fact, which is something we never really managed to do. But the idea is you test it with iteration of your business model. You say, okay, well, here I have a hypothesis now. I've went from a bunch of ideas to, let's say, 3 ideas. I can do 3 business models. I can look at how it works. I can then try to prototype to see if it's possible, in what ways, and then if it's not, I can come and refine it and things like that, which is the logic of innovation. It's iterations, and the big lesson for me, if they really can, apart from knowing a bit about the mechanics of the problem, is to understand that you don't jump to the solution. You take your time.
Which is the more difficult part for an engineer, right?
It's horrible for them. It's like a
Oh
nightmare.
yeah. Oh yeah. Because problems are. I love it's poetry to me, right? The way in which we have a very linear process for non-linearity, right? It's just this is paradox, right?
Well, you could, if you were a Catholic, in church, you have these stations, one of Jesus, how do you say, of Jesus ordeal,
Mhm.
It's more like that. You stand in front of the first one and you make a prayer, and then you move to the second one. It's not really the linearity, which is interesting, is that every image gives you a moment of reflection about where you stand and what happened and what is important for you emotionally. So it's more like that, but it has this linearity built in it, although it is really basically, like, for example, problem space is like I turn around on the problem for a long while, and then suddenly I get ejected into the solution, and I spend some time giving a lot of ideas and then trying to figure out which ones I'm going to want to work on. So it's also very circular,
Mhm.
but you go
No
from
doubt.
one to another.
Word. So in terms of like the learning objectives for the course, like, so for sure to experience the whole flow and to try it out. If we were, even though evaluation is just like good for you, what what are the things that you want when you say yes, these nerds learned the shit out of this shit? What is the stuff that we would say that composes of? Like, what are our objectives here?
Oh, so one is a good presentation. Okay, so you actually can talk about what you're doing to others. Okay, that's an important moment. Okay, and it's the internal coherence of your job. In other words, that's the important thing. In other words, an innovation is not an idea. An innovation is all the way down, right? You have to come up with some kind of artifact or plan or process or something. It is something. It's not just an idea. So that
Mhm.
is so it's the coherence of the job, and then it's, to a certain extent, it's also the various concepts and notions that they've learned along the way. Like, for example, a problem space. And the idea is that when they go to work afterwards, and no matter where, they can reuse this, right? They can reuse the tools. They're the tools that you find in the industry. Or when somebody says we must innovate, or there is this idea that innovation is a strategic, how do you say, strategic direction of the company, then they have a clue, basically.
Mhm.
Some people will just walk away with that, with having had a weird experience. Okay, I agree with that. I mean, but that's fine too. It's like, life is big, guys. And I say guys because in this case, it really is the case.
Okay. So both coming back to try and maybe check this, what I understand is terms of our goals, and see if there's anything else. Like, so primary goal is to, over the course of the process, is to have experienced this process to be able to present an artifact that reflects what you have landed on, and you know, whether that is a specific process, a specific tool, blah blah blah, whatever the innovation itself is, to be able to articulate that and to express. um, is it the intention in that presentation to also express the process by which we got there, or
I know in the presentation you do what you want. Basically, the idea is, what I'm trying to encourage them to do is to do something lively, not necessarily you can spend your 10 minutes trying to say, well, we did that, the innovation was this, the ideation was that, we find this is how we, like, for example, we use the Bono hats to this to refine the thing. These are tools also that you can use to refine your ideas or to select your ideas and things like that. So you can do that. But at the end, the presentation should be something more like a story. And I give them the story arc at the end. I give them a few ideas about how you tell stories, and I encourage them to get away from something with bullet points and to say something like more of a story. So what happened? What happened to your innovation? So, you know, you can start by saying, you know, Jeremy was walking down the road. You know, you can say something like that. You can say, you know, Sylvia met Marilyn, and that's it. That's how it started. You know, you could say it rained horribly, you know, for 3 days. So the idea is to really help them. Again, that's the fun part, is to try to present what you've done in a way that is lively and where people can actually bind to you what you're saying, rather than just sit there and just listen and think of something else. But that's up to them. They everything is up to them, and provided it's lively and it engages a conversation, basically. Yeah, some people have acted things, for example.
Yeah.
Very few do, huh? I mean, there's a, I have to say, I regret to say that in engineering there is a certain conservatism into how you how you deal with information.
Sure, more stuff than people, I get it. Okay, so coming back to learning goals. So at the end of this course, nerds will have have gone through this process, presented their 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 innovation, you know, have documented it into some form of artifact, presented their story. The measure of success there is that there should be a coherence to, like, the thing that they have explored and the thing that they deliver. That they will have experienced and participated in this learning process, that they will get some reusability out of the process and the components of it, and that they will have really learned through the experience of participation. When you say, yeah, it I guess there's a particular thing. Are there particular aspects of that, like, oh, I really hope to God these nerds learn X along the way?
Yeah, first of all, it's the idea, like I said, it's the idea to not rush to the solution. That's one of the most important things. The second thing that is very important is to see how you can act, something will emerge from the unknown, this experience, to really taste it, but in a way that is safe, huh? So this is why I'm thinking of telling them about the tools quickly to show them how it works. Although they might not understand a word, they might already have an idea of why they're there and what they serve, and that they're not going to be sort of like led to some kind of weird place in the middle of the forest and let go. But that's important. The experience of emergence. It's important in that course, the idea of self-organization of teams. You have to have roles. You start building things that is an efficient way of collaborating and fun and responsible, which is important. And it is to understand that it's a process, and to have an acquaintance with the process is very important. So the idea is, I think they should understand that there's a process of innovation and there is a trust. You can trust the process.
Nice.
What kind of feedback have you received in general about the current structure of the course?
Well, it was usually below what you thought, because they would come and they say, well, we got lost, and which for me was not a problem at all. It was part of the design of this thing, that you should feel a little bit like, in the middle of something that you didn't really know. And so there was a sort of survival thing, which I sort of like, don't worry, but still. So they always complain about the lack of structure, but as you can see, there's plenty of structure. And at the end, the funny thing is that at the end, so they would complain and blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, when we used to give a feedback moment where they, especially those who complain, came up. And then funnily enough, when they actually thought about it a little bit further than what they felt at times, they thought it was really interesting. And it was very enriching. So it had these two moments. The first moment is, it lacks structure, it's a bit weird, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, it was like, wow, this is amazing what happened to me and my team. And so it was a very good experience. So the experience was good at the end, but for the longest time, and this is why I want to narrow this, as this sort of feeling of lack of structure a little bit. But for them, it's like, going to China. So, and it will remain China. So, you go to China. I mean, some people might not like China after all,
Sure.
So maybe that could be your metaphor, like a trip to a very unknown world.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Trip to China.
But like, just for not being discriminatory with maybe some Asian, maybe you can try to create some sort of, well, not created, but maybe something from a book or something that it's less, that cannot address someone directly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's a good idea. We don't have Chinese students. But yeah. It's funny because I'm reading a lot about China these days, and it's funny because China for us has always been, and is still today, that which is completely other. There's nothing wrong with being the other. But it's true that everything from their language to their writing style to their alphabet, which they don't have, to all kinds of things, they seem to be very, very different, which makes it very hard for us to understand. But yeah, you're right. China might not be a good idea. But the idea is to go to somewhere which is real. I mean, maybe the northern Canada or something like that. The Arctic or something. Although people hate to be cold, I hate to be cold. So let's try the desert. A walk in the desert.
Exactly. Yeah, something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's advantages for both. Somewhere real, somewhere like there's like I think there's like a very interesting, like I really like this idea of like the trip to the unknown. That feels like a great metaphor for everyone. And I think there's a place for fiction in that as well. Like, so is there a particular work of fiction we might be able to like sneak into the syllabus, be like, hey, I just just for the sake of argument, it might be really helpful if you read this book about, a trip, being a trip into unknown territory and how they responded to it, like
It
Lost
would
in
have
the
to be a
Wilderness or
novel.
some shit like that.
Yeah, it would have to be a novel, quick, 30 pages or something.
There was a book that I
These
read.
people, Jeremy, these people don't read.
I know, but
But you can find a video with a summary of 10 minutes.
You're very good, Sylvia. You're very good. Videos. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, sure, yeah, why not? I mean, this is the era of Audible and of YouTube summaries and OpenAI. So, like the point is like a particular resource might be able to be offered or pointed to and said, hey, if you really want to grok this shit, like this is kind of like here's our syllabus, right? In an interesting way, and to work through that narrative arc in a way that that I think does what you're talking about in terms of your learning goal, that offers another avenue to experience this process and recognize that, hey, there will be trials and tribulations and particular moments of like, oh shit, but in the end we all live happily ever after, blah blah blah. So that feels like a good metaphor. In terms of, I guess there's clarifying questions. What else comes up? Let me go through these notes. So to just make sure that I have the min specs on this design brief. So we're at the Swiss University in this course on innovation and change. Our purpose is to understand and try this process, and perhaps to enjoy and learn from it in a way that gives us something we can make use of in previous contexts, to be able to express that experience learning and with some coherence. Our participants are mostly engineering students at master's level, and our parameters are, we've got 14 weeks total, broken into weekly sessions of 2 hours, where there is a goal of sort of containing lecture to around 40 minutes in this time box of two hours. And there's also an emphasis on self-organization in that parameter or in that purpose. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did you organize the? Sorry.
Oh no, the last question, and just to make sure that we're totally there, that if we're is that our parameter in terms of deadline is around end of June to be able to offer a proposal in terms of like a design storyboard with some justification in order to get feedback and potential uptake for delivery in September. Sorry, Sylvia, what were you going to ask?
How do you usually create the groups?
You self-organize. They and if they have a problem with that, so we can say, well, we have a list of students. We say, like you're 15, so it'd be nice for you to have like 3 groups of 5, and that's about it. And and you have a week to find out to find a group. If we had at one point we had not anymore, but at one point we had 50. So 50 is you say, well, organize in groups of 6, 7, whatever. Get a real group together.
Yeah, what's the total size of the course often?
Nowadays, I would say it's about 15 to 20, basically. But it can be 30, huh? It can go all the way up to 30.
Mm-hmm.
But,
so why would you like to include liberating structures? Like probably that should have been the first question, but
The liberating structures organize collective intelligence. I wanted to boost that. I want also to have different ways of addressing issues. You know, you have this very famous diagram that says, you know, presentation and brainstorming and things like that. And I wanted to see if there is in a course, in the sense where there's content to be delivered, what we can do with liberating structures to make it more participatory. Yeah, so that was one. And the second one was to see if liberating structures could be used within frameworks as a good way to organize research and information acquisition and sharing. So for example, you know, the way you do the business model canvas is you do the value proposition canvas for the proposition that you for your innovation. Okay, you test it like this, you test it with and with the job to against the job to be done, against gain and pains, against things like that. So so the idea is to see how you can enrich all of these things by either treating them through liberating structures or adding liberating structures, so that the experience is reinforced. In fact, that would be the dream,
Mhm.
to talk like Britain's Got Talent.
Is there when you think about the way that LS fit into how do you sort of imagine this thing going, do you see this as more like as LS slotting into that 40 minutes that is the structure, that is the sort of explicit time, or do you see this as being as offering more of, hey, try this for that rest of the hour plus of unstructured time, or both?
I would have hoped both, but it can definitely be used on the unstructured time, I think. I think for the various parts of the process and the various moments of the process, we can help organize reflection and the way people think. It can reinforce this idea of not being completely, you know, left alone and in the middle of nowhere. Because, you know, if you you know, use LS to actually get things like knowing the problem, exploring the problem space, exploring the various parts of how do you go about, you know. So that's one thing. But the idea would be also to use them within the 40 minutes if I can. Yeah, absolutely. In other words, to say, well, here is what I blah blah blah, and then let's do something like you know, critical uncertainties or something like that. Because now, something that I haven't said yet is that this course is entirely online, so we can use the Miro boards, we can use these tools that also are interesting.
Do you have uh, access, like license for that, like Myra or Murin?
No, I don't. It was my colleague that had access to this. I may have access to it from him, or I will have to have some kind of subscription. And it's funny, Jeremy, you mentioned AI. Now, AI is an interesting thing because AI helps a lot to go through content. You know, you type in AI, you know, what's a business model, Canvas, and you get everything. So maybe I don't have as much. So this might give have an impact. I know that, for example, in the exams, it's no use trying to ask definition like it used to be, you know, or to use how do you say question about attributes of various things, because they say what's the attribute of a job to be done, and boom, it just comes right up.
No.
The exam, by the way, so to also say is done with a computer. Everybody's and they have access to everything. They used to have access to everything, so now they have access to everything plus AI. So they read everything. So the thing is now the questions are more like a story and a very particular specific thing that you have to find so that you have to have some form of reasoning.
Well, so a way that you can hack that part of the exam is like if you do before the presentations of each of the groups, then you can ask about which group was telling about this thing.
Yeah, exactly. 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 You can have, but it's tricky, huh? With AI, it becomes very tricky in exam. But since I don't care, I don't care. I don't care about grades. I'm not at all interested in that. I'm
Yeah,
interested
yeah.
that
I think
everybody.
the measure of success is like if you can pretend to be a doctor convincingly that helps people, when they're injured and treats their illness, and you're pretending, but you can do it effectively, then turns out, surprise, you're a doctor.
Yeah, it's more like it's like more like being you're crossing a river, and I make sure that everybody goes from one side to the next, you know. I'm gonna have to go and get some will have to get rescued because they're gonna be, but I want everybody to be on the other side so that they get their points and they move on in their lives,
Mhm. Yeah, I'm wondering to ask you, like coming back to how would you imagine, sorry, to use liberating structures? I have a question, and it's what if you also let, not always, but sometimes, people to discover the process or the frameworks through liberating structures?
Yeah, lovely. Lovely. If I can use liberating structure within the content and within the concept space, it would be great. Absolutely. The more you discover by yourself, the more the more, how do you say, at peace you are, I guess, with things. Because it's yours. It's not somebody that tells you something that you don't really grasp. You actually experience it. And then when you experience it, it's yours, really. But yeah, I mean, if that's what we had started in our crew thing, like on a tool, but it can be on other concepts. There are times where you may or you may not, like for example, there's a system of ideation where you have to come up with like a really crazy idea. Well, crazy ideas are not that easy, contrary to what everybody thinks. Because the idea is to is to I don't know if you've heard it. It's called the CK theory, and it's an engineering, in fact, method of ideation, where basically you look at what you have, like what kind of knowledge base you have, and then by expressing a completely crazy idea, you cannot resolve it with the knowledge base that you have. You say, like for example, a boat that flies. Okay, a boat that flies is something that doesn't exist, okay, or didn't exist at one point in time, and you could not build a boat that flies with just the knowledge of building boats. So you had to look at something else. You had to discover other areas of knowledge, other areas of things that you could then use or exapt into the thing, and that's a very, very good way of dealing with things. So maybe, the idea of getting to something completely nuts is interesting as well.
Mhm.
Anyway, there are
So
lots
there's
of tools, that may, for example, I remember we organized within the meetup at a time with David from Colombia. We had a Bono hat session. And that was lots of fun. So I know you can do Bono, and Bono is really cool when you are at the point of testing something, and you can do that. But yeah, and you can do that with liberating structures. So there are tools, I guess, that one can have. But for me, it's I've never done it, so I don't know.
Yep, there is for sure a metric shit ton of tools that exist. So I guess so I guess I definitely want to dig in a little bit more in terms of like the existing content base, right? So like if you can forward or send me whatever the course material is or the primary resources that you're sending these nerds so I can sort of thumb through that stuff and just make sure that we're sort of thinking through the lens of the right shit that you want to put in front of people that can both, I think, of course, structure the process importantly, and also reduce the visible radicality of change from the outside in. Because, like, well, what do you mean you're making this big change? Like, you're using all the same frameworks, so I don't understand what you're doing. That seems so different. This seems like the same shit. That would be really nice to reduce any resistance from the context by making sure everything's sort of shrouded or wrapped in familiarity. That's a good vibe.
Yeah, will do. I'll send you the program, things like that.
Word. I I think in terms of like what makes sense for me in the next step, maybe it would be nice to actually figure out see if it's possible to do a speed run through that, Philip, so that you can just basically say, all right, here's the process, week one, blah blah blah, we do this.
Yeah.
And that's
I will
probably
send
going
you
to
that.
be
I will send you that document.
yeah.
The
But I mean for like
exercise.
send me the documentation, but I mean as well in the next call to just go through it with you.
Okay. All right.
Would be helpful. So
Although it
that at
has
least like,
changed, it changed all the time because basically you're
of
trying to
course,
the thing is I will do that, but it'll be around what we talked today. It'll be
yeah, it's fine. It's fine if it's just, I just want to make sure that I have that I think I understand what the fuck you're talking about, but I just want to make sure that I probably don't. There's probably a whole bunch of shit and like super smart questions that I didn't think to ask. So show me what you've got right now so that at least I can ensure that there's the baseline is covered, and then we can think about it. Like my first intuition is I think there's we can make life the challenging bit is really going to be in that is the initial start moment. So not only pick your group but define your problem space. And my first intuition to just throw out there is like the ability to set that initial container of find yourself a client is probably, I think, going to be an easier route than pick a problem that you want to solve. um, just because by finding yourself a client, if I'm an internal client as a person on the team, I there's also a probability that I get to be a little bit of an asshole because I think I know because I'm the client. It's my idea, it's my problem. But if we can encourage these groups, we can encourage everybody to go out there and find a client and maybe do an initial assessment with them, then you're able to shift the basis. I think it's going to be much harder to go through the process and be the client at the same time. That those two roles might be, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's all fine and dandy. But that's my first pass. Is like, how do we go through enabling folks to find the problem space that they want to explore and develop solutions towards? And I think it gets a little bit juicier. I mean, even if somebody takes on the role of client, it's fine. It's just going to have to be an explicit role, and they're going to have to be able to step outside of the role of client in order to engage in the process effectively.
yeah, absolutely. And there's something that I wanted to add to all this is to have the dimension of responsibility. So the problem cannot be a trivial problem. You have an engineer, you say, okay, well, the camera is 10 million pixel. I'll do a 30 million pixel. I mean, nobody knows how to do it, but I'll do it. And he comes up with a solution at one point. That's not what I meant. I would like to give them the opportunity also to think about things that matter and that not necessarily that they're all social and they have to address water problems or something like that. But it would be interesting to think about things that I never included in my course so far, which is basically, okay, so what's the cost of doing it? I mean, we used to be, even if it's not put into true measures, it's like to think about what is the cost of doing it? Because the idea of feasibility so far in the business model is divorced from that. You know, you have to know the activities, you have to know the resources that are necessary, you have to know the stakeholders, but you don't have this notion of, okay, what does it cost in terms of things that are in terms of sustainable items, in terms of sustainability. I mean, is it something that I want to do? Like, for example, there's the big discussion on wind things, you know, for example. Okay, so on the one end, they're supposed to be green, on the other, they're absolutely not.
Mhm.
At least to introduce this way of thinking, I think it would, or things like that.
But when you say what's the cost of, do you mean like what's the cost of the problem space or what's the cost of the potential solution space?
The
No,
Like
potential
I think,
solutions for
good question. Maybe both. Maybe both. But basically, the
because
solution space. The solution space is when you come up with an artifact. Say, oh God, we're going to do this. We're going to do a solar panel, guys. Okay, great. This is going to reduce this, that, and the other thing. It's desirable. Blah blah blah. And then you say, well, how much does it cost? You know, like what do you need? You need lithium. You need this. You need that. You need batteries. You need things like that. So at the end of the day, what is the cost of your innovation on the environment? Not in terms of business. I mean, viability in the business model is only concerned. So I don't know, Jeremy, because now that I'm talking to you about this, I remember, didn't what's his name, Dan, have a sort of like a tweaked business model canvas that we showed that we put in
yep,
our thing?
the social innovation business model canvas or some shit like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
there is in there. So yeah, so there's a couple interesting. There's a lot of interesting ways to integrate this. So one is around, I think that I see you're pointing at is somewhat around the theory of constraints, right? So
yeah,
when you talk about what's the cost of this, I think it's also interesting um, to talk about like the opportunity costs, like what's the cost of this of not addressing this problem space is also
yeah.
an interesting way
Opportunity
to
cost, yeah.
prioritize problem space, right? If we can make a dent in this, we can reduce suffering or whatever,
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Okay. Mm, dope.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is I'll
um
send you guys a few docs that I have in my thing. I really am very grateful for you guys to be interested in this because and I hope it is my hope that if we come up with anything, it's something that we'll be able to share with the community at large, and maybe it'll be helpful for other people to use it either as a course or as part of something that helps them or their team or whatever do something.
for sure. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting question mark, right? In terms of like how do we turn whatever we're doing into something that's not only useful for you, but also useful for us individually? Because I like fuck me, I gotta figure out a way to get paid. Like I really, really gotta figure out a way to get paid. And like of course that creates this that of course contributes to the knowledge commons as well. That I mean,
Yeah.
like my innovation, if I can help myself get paid, I think then we have figured out something that everybody can use to get paid in some significant way. So cool. Seems
So
like a
when do you want
vibe.
to meet next? When do you want us to meet in the next? When are you free?
what do we got by end of June? So we've got 4, 5, 8 weeks. So what's going on in between now and then? I don't have a ship right now. I'm available. That's not a good thing. I need to change that. But right now, I do have availability. So between in the context of those, what 8 weeks? How many calls can we squeeze in without like really hating each other and putting in too much work?
Once a week?
Yeah, once a
One
week
once a
at
week,
least.
or we
At
can
least,
start, and if we finish, that's good.
at least to preserve progress. I might go twice a week just to like really get some
Okay,
sensation of
for me,
accelerate.
it's very possible.
Because I don't think, I don't expect to do shit about this outside of the context of these calls. I mean, maybe some sketching around, and blah blah blah, some having fun. But okay, getting some feedback.
So,
What do you think,
what,
Sylvia?
next
What works for you?
Tuesday? What about you, Sylvia? Are you sort of okay with us or what?
So partially, although I think I'm pro of pre-work. So for example, like the material that Philip is going to share with us, I think it's also better like to digest it. So if you want to book a call for yourself, maybe then you can just like book it and then go through it, because I think that's also relevant. So in that way we can go a little bit faster and maybe just come with clarifying questions, or that's part of it. I'm not that available because I'm still finding a job, but also so from time to time I will have interviews when the thing comes in. But I'm also like busy in the afternoon, so it will be either the mornings or after 5:30 in general. And
Fine with me.
so you want to meet again this week?
Yeah, that's probably going to be actually not possible if we're constrained to the mornings. Because let's see, I've got the kids on Thursday for whatever reason. I don't remember, but I see it on the calendar. And I mean, I've got the kids on Friday, so that's going to suck too. Tomorrow, like, so from my perspective, Philip, I would for sure feel good about jamming tomorrow and going through the materials. Because if you send me a bunch of docs, like the chance that I actually look at them is next to nothing. So,
Well, I have
but
to
if you hold
translate
my,
them because they're all in French, huh? So give me a.
yeah, so definitely don't even don't even like, um, so,
But you can send them to me. I understand some French, so
Oh
send
yeah,
them to
oh,
me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna translate them in Texan for Jeremy.
like, I would
Every course
say.
is gonna start with y'all. Y'all, how you all doing this morning?
What's up, nerds?
Yeah, what's up, nerds?
So
That's the thing.
let's see what. So for me, the best bet is just going to be to do, like I said, to do a speed run through the content of the course. So I don't need documentation as much as I need you to like just grab my hand and like show me what it how it works. And then I can I think I can grok it quick enough.
Well, I mean, we can do another call and I'll just walk you guys through it. It's not gonna take a
Cool.
long time, right? It's just 14 different items on an Excel sheet with a few ideas about the concepts. Like I said, it's organized.
Cool. And do you, so the current Miro board as well?
That I have to go and see how I can retrieve it because I'm not the owner for the moment.
Yeah, but if you can send me a link to it, and if it's permissioned, I can go I can poke around it and I can make a copy. So that's easy enough.
Let me see if I can, because I have to. By the way, the reason why my colleague stopped is that he has cancer,
Oh
and so it's
fuck.
not a joyful thing. But I will ask him about Miro, and it's his board. He might have decided to just can it, Miro board. I don't know. Okay, I will try to
Yeah.
get.
one thing that also seems relevant to me in my desire for opportunism is there is somebody who I would welcome the opportunity to work with, that I think I don't know to what extent. I don't know. Yeah. At any rate, there's somebody I think I would like to float the idea of like jamming on this into. That who I don't have a lot of experience working with, so that's what gives me like the question mark of like, ooh, do I want to do I want to actually? Yeah. And B, like it could be a good design exercise because he's a smart player, and B, in especially that aspect that is like designing pretty mural boards, he's got a lot of proficiency that frankly I need to learn from. So that could be super useful. I'll talk to him, see if the vibe's there. Even though I
Okay.
know he's working on some other shit. And he's also got a pretty good he's got a great sense and a very good set of relationships around a place that might be willing to like pay for an implementation. But
Oh, wow.
so
Good.
we'll see. Let me track him down.
Or-
Sylvia, when I float that to you, how does that vibe? Like, does that make you want to go, I don't want to do this if Jeremy's going to invite other friends? Or like, you're of course my best friend, Sylvia. You know that.
No, it's not. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Cool.
So
Well, we'll see.
tomorrow at 10 again or at 9?
No, alors tomorrow is a bad day for me. I have meetings all day. I can
Okay.
Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, Friday I've got the
And
kids.
Thursday and
so-
Friday, Jeremy is with his kids. So
Yep.
or
So
I
it
can
doesn't seem like we're
Thursday
gonna rally
afternoon.
again.
I don't know about you, Jeremy, but maybe Thursday or Friday you can do after 5:30 on Thursday, for example. Maybe.
Let's see. Tomorrow. Let's see. It would have to be after. So after I get the kids to bed. Thursday I could do in the evening, but I don't know if that's going to be feasible to actually put in a lot of grind. Like that's going to be 8:30 or 9.
Does it work for you, Philip?
It works. It's not. I'm honestly, I'm not at my best, but at that time, I want to play. I want to drink. I want to do something else. But
Of
and
course.
usually,
This is it. I'm with that. Yes. That's the vibe. So bottle of wine, and we run through the pipeline. This is going to be epic. I like it. I'm with that.
hey, but by the way, Sylvia, you're in Germany, right?
Yes,
Okay, whereabouts in Germany?
Berlin.
Berlin. That's the coolest place to be, right? I knew Jeremy, you're in where in Holland? In Amsterdam?
Amsterdam. Yep.
Okay. And is that the same thing with Ewan and Nadia? They're neighbors or what?
They're in the Netherlands. Nobody lives in Amsterdam because it's unaffordable. But yeah, they're local.
Okay. All right. So shall we so tomorrow no, Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah,
8:30.
Thursday evening, 8:30, like with
Jeremy
wine. With wine. Strong requirement with wine.
Jeremy and
So you send us an invite and then Jeremy, can we use this same link? No.
Yeah, we can use this link. It'll still exist. Let me just copy this calendar invite to that, and that'll be easier.
and you said 8:15.
8:30. The kids
8:30.
are going to bed later, so
And it's the same link, right?
yeah. So let me just grab this link. I'm literally just going to copy this calendar invite, to that day. And if it's not this link, we ping the chat and Telegram and let's do it. It's Thursday. And I think it also makes sense. Anyway, like bottle of wine. You can be at whatever level of progress on that bottle of wine at 8:30, I think. That's
You
It
know,
could
you
be
know
your
what? You know
second
what?
bottle of wine too.
Well, it's okay if I start dozing, guys. Don't worry about it. You know, just make sure you record what you're saying.
yeah, it'll be all right. Cool. All right.
Okay, guys.
So,
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
You too.
see you
Bye.
around.
Bye.
All right. I guess there's nothing else to say, nerds. This is the vibe. That was session 1 on whatever this thing is going to be. We're doing some liberating structures for innovation and change. I wonder who else has already done something like this. Can we cheat and be lazy and exapt what already exists? That would be less, would stroke my ego less, but it would probably be easier or not. I don't know. It's just fucking design space. I'm sure it'll work out anyway. What do you think? Is this worth doing? I think it's worth doing. Seems interesting. I guess I'm gonna hit up my friend. But I'm not gonna tell you who it is. And first I'm gonna talk to him. And then I'll see if they want to play. All right, nerds. Anyway, fuck off. Love you.